Unification can be good to a certain extent, but at the point where you have extreme standardization is where we don't agree with the idea that our students' minds are going to be critically depleted of their critical thinking skills. 2 points of clash for the house today. First of all, will this improve the education system itself? Second, what do these benefits look like to the students themselves? Broadly, on the first point of clash, they've brought this idea that variability across the curriculum and across the nation has meant that there's been less cohesion and thus that there's been unfair marking and general consequences for the education system itself in terms of inefficiencies. Why is this wrong? First of all, they didn't even engage with the idea that content and marking are extremely different. We have to be able to understand, for especially things like English, where you're marked on your interpretation and your analysis skills. A teacher is still able to fairly see if you've analyzed The Lord of the Flies and if you've analyzed The Great Gatsby to a certain extent. It's not just the idea that teachers are only able to mark one certain essay. They've learned one interpretation and they mark on an extreme grid. If the student hasn't said these exact same words, then they don't get the marks. This is not how the status quo has worked, and this is why we continuously try to engage with our students on getting new interpretations of the text, new interpretations of the world, and allowing them to critically think and think for themselves, because we don't agree with the idea of extreme standardization where everybody has this one mono ideology, one interpretation on everything. Because at the point where you're in a school and you're only being taught one thing, it sends this incentive and idea that students, there's only one correct answer to everything. But that's simply not true in how we function as humans in today's society. So second of all, these variabilities and these different interpretations of how we learn are extremely important to the education itself. Why is this? Because teachers are all different people. They all have different specialities. They all have very nuanced degrees. They all know how to critically think and how to better educate our students. If you only give them one text, if you only give them one topic to learn of and to teach their students, you're not fully using the advantages of these teachers, the skills of their teachers. They're not going to be utilized at all. At the point where their only job is to do one thing, to teach a standardized topic that they're basically reading off a PowerPoint, is when you're not utilizing teachers, and effectively the students aren't going to be learning properly because A, the teachers simply won't be engaged with the content they're learning because it's the same thing for 30 years, the same exact marking, the same exact papers, the same exact interpretations. B, the students are going to be much less incentivized to learn because they aren't getting the proper education that they need, because the teachers themselves don't even want to be teaching the exact same thing anymore. At this point, the education system is going to be critically failing the students, the teachers, and the entire society at this point. We have to be able to understand that these teachers know what is best for their students. They know the different texts that have worked for them in the past. They know how to get their students to engage with different sorts of texts. And by stopping these teachers from teaching different things and their own interpretations of the math, of the English, of the science, means that you completely restrict teachers from being able to use the years and years of learning at university that they've gained to be able to actually teach these students. Because at the point where there's one standardized learning education system, one topic, one interpretation, is when you basically have these students learning off robots. These teachers aren't even there for them. You're basically just having them read off a book, just memorizing and then regurgitating that during an exam. And we think this is critically a negative aspect on the education system itself. There should be more interpretation, there should be more variability, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be less cohesion, because the schools can still work together to analyze if these students actually have the correct interpretations. Do they have the fundamental values of the scientific method? Do they have a fundamental understanding of how the math works? Depending on how that is taught is indifferent. We still can mark them fairly across these subjects as long as we're able to mark them on how they've been able to analyze different texts, how they've fundamentally understood in a holistic way different math questions. It's not about how we teach them, it's not about the content we teach them, it's about if the students are actually critically thinking, and that's why we've won this point of clash. Second of all, the benefit to the students themselves. Broadly, they've just asserted this idea that at 7 minutes and 30 seconds, that uni is going to be much easier for these students, and that they're going to be able to travel much easier globally to other universities and study abroad and other applications to your job. Why is this inherently wrong? First of all, we've already explained to you the idea that standardization means that you have much less of interpretation. So at the point where you're only learning about New Zealand cultural texts in English means that you're not learning the fundamental differences in our culture between New Zealand, Korea, Africa. We could have been studying and choosing texts from around the globe and learning the different interpretations, the nuances of culture in these different texts by learning and understanding what's going on historically in other nations. How could you argue that they'd have a better chance going to an international university when they don't even understand the fundamental mechanisms of their culture, their nuances, their societal norms, because all they've learned is one standardized text about In the Rubbish Tin from Aparana Taylor? They simply will have a massive disadvantage when all the students learn the exact same thing, when they all think the exact same way. They'll never have an advantage at university, and especially not later on in the future. The fact is that they focus so much on this high school education system. They haven't given any thought onto why this will negatively affect them at university. Because at the point where you just have students memorizing what to learn because there's just one thing that's been recycled every single year is when they lose critical thinking skills, and by the time they get to university, this sort of memorization is so ingrained in their bodies they can't critically think, they won't have these skills to apply at university, they won't do well at university, and thus they're going to suffer so much more. It might even be to the point where the standardization is so extreme that they have no critical thinking skills at all, that they might not even be able to get into university, and we're going to have more significant dropouts. They also brought in the idea that somehow students are going to be more engaged with the learning itself. Why is this fundamentally wrong? The fact is, in subjects like English, when students are able to freely choose what text they want to analyze, this is so much better for engagement itself. If you try to force like so many students across the world into choosing one text, into analyzing one text, there's such a big chance that students aren't going to be able to engage with it. And if they're not engaging with it, they're not learning, they're not trying, they don't even want to be at school. There's so many negative consequences on the students themselves that the opposing team was never able to recognize. Thank you.